Hey all, Pete here. Um, Here at home today, working. Still here in the middle of this zombie apocalypse. While everybody's dodging the COVID cooties. Really anxious to get back to my office. I call my home office, the man cave number 2, and my office at work is man cave number 1. Kind of funny. This is the only room that my wife will allow there to be dead animals on display, as she calls them, dead animals. But she makes exceptions for birds because in our living room we have a wood duck I shot and a pheasant. And so, like, if I was more of a bird hunter, then I'd probably have my whole living room full of taxidermy of birds. But I'm a trapper first and a hunter second and a bird hunter probably third. And so I don't have a lot of birds to put up in the house. But in here I got my lion and my coyote, couple of my coyote pelts over here. I got a fox over on this wall. I got a beaver above the camera over here. But she calls this the dead animal room, So anyway, this is where I see clients right now during the quarantine time. That's not what my video is about today, but just a couple thoughts on that. A lot of my friends are like me. They're kind of really, really libertarian minded and are having a lot of issues with this. And they're like, well, Pete, why would you voluntarily quarantine yourself in your house? And I'm like, well, because one, I can, and I can still work. So if me quarantining myself in my house helps somebody else not get sick, it's no skin off my back, right? I'm not like a jerk. I'm not looking to hurt people. Okay. So I can quarantine myself. I can still work from home. In fact, most of my clients are teenagers, so they actually like seeing me online instead of having to come to my office. The other reason is that most of my, or not most, but a lot of my teenagers that I see are being raised by grandparents. And elderly are in the at-risk population. And if something were to happen to their caregivers, then these kids would end up in foster care. I don't want to be responsible for that because I was able to work from home but chose not to just because I wanted to choose not to. Now, if I couldn't work from home, and even if I wasn't labeled an essential employee, then I would either work anyway or find someplace else that I could work, because I think that the right to work and the privilege of being able to work and provide for my family outweigh whatever risk I might be taking for myself, in a time like this. But I would also not purposely put myself around people who were vulnerable just because I was choosing to take that risk, So it's very possible to be somebody who doesn't trust the government a whole lot, but also has concerns about, what's going on. We're not getting good information from the media or the government. And there's a lot of conflicting information from doctors. And so, I feel like I'm being reasonable and I'm doing what I can, but I'm still taking care of my family. You push me in a corner, tell me I can't take care of my family, you'll see a different Pete. But that hasn't happened to me yet. Anyway, let's get off that subject. Today's video number 4 in the beginner trapping series. I just came up with that name. I don't know if I like it or not, but real quick, today I'm just going to answer some questions. So surprisingly, I haven't got like a ton of watches on my videos or anything like that, and I'm not expecting to necessarily get a ton, but I actually did have some people email me some questions. They're friends of mine, so they'll recognize their question if they're watching my videos. And by friends, I mean they're people I know, right? So I know a lot of people all over the United States. I've worked in a lot of different places, and so I try to stay connected with people. And so these are some questions that people have asked that just don't know a lot about trapping. These aren't necessarily questions from people that I think are necessarily going to get into trapping, but new trappers, watching these videos, these might be questions they have too. Okay, and this goes back to one of the points of my video of these videos is to dispel misinformation about trapping, so that people who don't know anything about it can be better informed about it instead of just believing BS that gets put out by folks that want to stop all trapping and basically stop all hunting and harvesting of any animals for any reason because they think it's a good idea. So the first question I got was why trap and why did you start trapping? When I was in fourth grade in Idaho, in fourth grade, you study Idaho history. I don't know what they study in fourth grade now, but when I was in fourth grade, we studied Idaho history. And when we started learning about the French Canadian trappers that basically were the first to kind of settle this state, the beaver trappers, man, I was like, where do I sign? I mean, that seemed like the coolest friggin' thing you could go do in the whole world. And it wasn't at all weird to me because my family was a hunting family. We ate deer and elk and duck and pheasant and, and so like, oh, beaver trappers, this is cool. That's what got me interested initially. And then, like I mentioned in one of my other videos years later, I met a guy who was a brand new teacher for my dad at Hanson High School. And he taught me how to call predators and trap, and we're still friends today. My dad died 6 years ago, but me and this other guy, we're still friends today. I talk to him all the time. We're supposed to go fishing next weekend. He's a great man and one of my heroes, So why did I start trapping, or why do I trap now? I trap because I'm an environmentalist and a conservationist, and that might sound weird to some people, but if I can work within the cycles of nature and be a part of the cycles of nature, then I will. And it makes far more sense to me to go out and hunt and shoot a deer on my own in nature and be part of the circle of life, and eat non-steroidal, non-whatever meat, wild game that's good for you, than it does to go buy something from the store. Trapping for me is the same thing. Fur bearers are a renewable resource. And we've gotten so twisted in this country that we'd rather create all kinds of products that damage the very environment that the people that use those products profess to want to protect, when we have great sources of warmth and clothing and all kinds of things that fur bearers can provide. And if you don't think they provide much, then do your homework a little bit on that. It's just like when people say, well, the only thing we get from a cow is meat. We get tons of products from cows. We get tons of products from pork. And we can get a lot of different products from fur bearers. And China and Russia still understand that. But America seems to want to put the rights of animals above the rights of people. And then call the people that want to go harvest animals the sociopaths. Think about that for a second. I'm a sociopath because I trap. Really? You want to put the rights of an animal above a human being, and you're calling me a sociopath? Now, I'm not talking about going out and being cruel to animals. And I can easily argue with anybody that wants to say that trapping is cruel. As I've talked about the traps I use, it's about being ethical and humane. The purpose of a trap is to catch and hold an animal. It's not to torture an animal. Okay? Wildlife biologists use leg hold traps to catch and radio collar wolves. All right? So, I'm not going to get into, traps are not inhumane. There aren't spikes in them. They're not meant to shatter a leg or something like that. They're meant to catch and hold. So if catching and holding something is inhumane and torture, then I guess maybe football is torture, because in football you have to catch and hold and tackle somebody. I mean, anyway. So I trap because I'm an environmentalist. I value the environment. I want to be a part of the environment. I want to use what Mother Earth provides me with, and I want to use it responsibly so that it can continue to be a renewable resource into the future. That's why I trap. And it's fun. I like it. It's a tradition in Idaho. It's a tradition in my family. We were sheep herders and cattle ranchers in my ancestors, and they had to manage predators. And I like to trap predators because it helps the deer and elk populations. And I'll do a whole video on the biology of this. But that's why. Okay. Is there a coyote season? That's another question I got. Sort of in Idaho. In Idaho, the coyote season is all year. So July 1st to June 30th or whatever. Some states have, I think, a season on coyotes, but probably not very many, just because they're so prolific. They have now basically found their way to all of the lower 48. And they're a really interesting predator. It's pretty much impossible. You could never extirpate coyotes because the way they work in the nature cycle. And I'll do a video on that too. So in Idaho there's a coyote season. It's year round. So do you only trap during the coyote season? Okay, so I trap coyotes from October 1st until about the first week of January, maybe the second week of January. If I lived further north, I would trap later than that. But down here, I get started a little earlier and I end a little earlier because their fur starts to go kind of cruddy. And the point of trapping them is to be able to sell their fur. So that's the next question is, what do you do with the fur? Well, with all the fur bearers that I trap, once you trap them, you bring them home, you skin them. So you take the pelt off, you flesh the pelts, which is getting all the gristle and fat and stuff off. And then you stretch them and dry them and prep them for the fur sale. And then you take them to the fur sale and you sell them. And fur sales work kind of like a silent auction. You check your fur in. You have what's called a lot of fur, LOT, lot. And then fur buyers go throughout the couple days and put bids on the fur, and the highest bid takes your fur. And you can set a minimum bid on your fur. So you might say, well, I want at least $800 for my coyotes. And if no one meets your minimum bid, then they don't sell, or you can say no minimum bid, and whatever, if someone bids $1 and nobody bids more than that on your furs, they sell. And no one's going to come to you and go, you only got bid $1. You sure you want to sell them? I mean, if you don't put a minimum bid, then whatever the minimum bid is, that's who gets your fur, right? Fur market goes up and down a lot depending on what's going on with China and Russia. That's who buys most of the fur because they're smart and they understand that it's durable and warm and there's an endless supply of it as long as it's managed well, which we do. In fact, I think sometimes we overmanage our fur in the United States, our fur bearing harvest, our harvest of fur bearers. I think we overmanage it sometimes. I'll post at some point, I'll post some pictures of what happens when you don't do any kind of management. I'll show you some pictures of animals with mange and, all kinds of stuff. So anyway, that's what you do with the fur. Someone asked me, do you eat the stuff you trap? No, not usually. I mean, if I was starving, I might eat a coyote, but they're pretty nasty. I mean, a coyote can live off of cow manure if it has to. So they're kind of gross. Not a big fan of fox. Now, bobcat meat's not bad. I don't trap bobcats intentionally. I might this year actually run a bobcat line with a good friend of mine. So Caesar, if you're watching, don't forget, we're going to try to trap some cats this year. But bobcat meat's not bad. It's kind of bland, and so you can kind of season it, to kind of fit with whatever you're doing. A lot of guys make chili out of it and stuff. So if we catch some bobcats, I'll probably eat them. And I've had beaver, and beaver shank is really, actually, it's better than roast beef, in my opinion. But my wife won't get on board with me on that one. I think if I brought a beaver in the house to eat it, I might end up not just doing broadcast from the man room, but I might end up sleeping in here. And muskrat's actually not bad. I've eaten muskrat. It's not bad. I think I'm probably going to actually start eating more of the water stuff I trap, like beaver and muskrat, just because it's free. It's a free source of meat. I'll have to figure out a way to cook it without freaking my wife out too bad. But I don't eat coyotes. I don't eat fox. But I have had bobcat. It's not bad. Beaver's pretty good actually, and muskrat's edible. It's not gross. It's not like drop dead delicious. It's not tenderloin, but it's edible. And the last one is, what do you trap and where? So I trap. My favorite stuff to trap is water trapping. So that's what I learned back in the day. I think that's probably what most people start learning to trap, is like with muskrats. But I've never kind of found something I like to trap more than water stuff. So I like to trap muskrats, mink, and beaver. And I like to trap rivers and creeks and ponds. I like to be out in the water. I like the water. I like being around water. I like to swim. And I just, something about the environment of the water is really kind of therapeutic to me. But I also trap coyotes, and I got way more serious about coyotes the last couple of years, and fox. I have never really gone after bobcats, but I think I'm going to this year. And eventually, my bucket list is to take a month off in the winter and do a long line for wolves and coyotes from horseback in the mountains, or maybe down in Nevada, at my young at heart and extremely handsome and youngish looking cousin Brent's house. He gave me shit because I called him old on my last video. Anyway, and as far as where, I trap coyotes out in the deserts, on ranches for landowners that border deserts. I trap coyotes and fox on a lot of farmland, and then creeks and rivers, ponds, for the water animals. Again, this is Pete. Those are some quick question and answers. My next video is going to be trap modification on Long Spring Coyote traps part 2. And so if you have questions, email them to me. I'll try to cover them. And remember, God is great, guns are good, and freedom is precious. So hold on to your freedoms. And until next time, take it easy.